Reddit ask me anything. I am a whistleblower. Ask me anything. I am a whistleblower. Ask me anything. I landed my dream job and worked for one of the most respected institutions in the world. Then I blew the whistle. I lost my career, friends, and burned a lot of bridges along the way. I am not doing this for upvotes. I strongly feel with all the flurry concerning Edward Snowden I could share some light on my personal experience of the process. From getting alienated, papered, people spying on me, losing my job, interviews, etc. It was by far the most painful, stressful experience of my life, which in no way compares to what he did. I need to be discreet with some details for obvious reasons. Have sent mods verification. I appreciate if anyone is able to identify me to keep it secret. What did you blow the whistle on? I had one of the top jobs in my field for medical research. Once I got there I worked 12-15-hour days for several months. By the 4th-5th month, I noticed that there were several things completely fraudulent, ranging from, but not limited to, falsification of records, manipulation of data to achieve favorable results, intentional misapplication of government funding, illegal subject testing, unapproved testing of studies. By the 7th month, my boss started to realize I wasn't going with the flow and initiated steps to start to limit my data access and alienate me from others. What was the last straw that made you finally blow the whistle? Videos of therapy sessions were being edited to make it seem like patients were progressing when in fact they were performing worse than baseline. A wealthy family from another country with poor English was in tears when they saw the video of her child's progression. They were instructed to keep practicing the therapy techniques at home. The next week the mother confided in me that she felt she was failing as the child wasn't progressing and broke down in tears, saying what a good service we are performing. I didn't have the heart to tell her that we weren't doing anything but becoming a paper mill. What kind of medical research were you doing? Research was in the neuroscience field, with a specific focus on rehabilitating patients' language whom lost the ability to communicate due to stroke, or were born that way. What rehabilitation techniques was the lab using? I recently wrote a report on the uses of music therapy in language rehabilitation of stroke patients. I was just wondering if any of the therapies I researched turned out to be not all they were cracked up to be. This is very close to what the lab was researching. That's very interesting. Did the lab claim that the intonation therapy was more successful than it was? How would that benefit the lab? They claimed it was the end all. Along with other techniques they had, they deliberately found reasons to exclude subjects from their sample size, and would openly discuss this in lab meetings of how they were excluding subjects. How do you know they are spying on you? One of the employees whom I trusted, hanged out with, and genuinely liked, called me and asked if we could get lunch the next day. He informed me this was clearly by the request of the director, in order to find out what I know. He seemed very distraught over the phone about the whole process, so I figured I wouldn't put him in a bind, and wouldn't reveal anything either, and told him it was okay. He showed up the next day and revealed to me the data they were deleting, the documents they were forging. I was already terminated by this point, and such, which actually shed more light on things I didn't know about. I made the mistake of telling him of some of the things I knew, and how I knew the computer team could retrieve deleted data, and he broke down and cried. He said he had to report the next day to the director and would not tell him any of this, and seemed pretty resolute in that. He also said he would call me the next day. I never heard back from him. Looking back now, do you think it was worth it? Has anything changed at your past employer, or do you wish you'd kept quiet? It's very tough to say because all my contact with everyone was cut off. Completely. I do however feel it was worth it, as it was completely unethical to what they were doing and they were inculcating young minds to perform research in a completely improper way. I am fed bits and pieces from 2 friends of mine who are no longer employed there either, who assure me things have changed a bit. Funding has been completely suspended. All projects were stopped, but I do not know how long those changes will last. There was 3 concurrent investigations which spouted from my one interview initially, along with 2 of my friends later corroborating a lot of what transpired by stepping up as well, which was very brave of them as they had more on the line than I did. Just curious, how long ago was this? Less than 2 years ago. Did the head guy lose his job? Not yet. This angers me. How much were you earning before and how much are you earning in your current job, if you have one? That is, does the US government give any sort of reward for snitching on people who scam it? The government awards a percentage of defrauded money back to the whistleblower. Most whistleblowers cases takes around 5 years to reach a conclusion, so it's a lengthy process. Hi, I'm in research, and could hazard a good guess at who you are. I'm at the postdoc stage of my career and have been encountering many of the same issues. I've even personally engaged in some stuff that, looking back, wasn't even close to the right way to do the science but was what needed to be done to make manuscripts and grants and prestige for my boss. I feel so guilty. I can't even describe the loathing and shame. I hate myself and my career and I contemplate dark things. This isn't for sympathy. I made some bad choices, but honestly, I dove into science with all the wonder and zeal of a kid who grew up on Mr. Wizard. I'm not even totally sure what all happened, and in reality, I didn't even do anything that I don't see happening all over the place. Everywhere I've ever worked, not everyone cherry picks and conveniently excludes data points for BS reasons. But once you know to suspect it and what the signs are, you start to recognize it disturbingly often, and then you see the system that we have in place that enables it. From hotshot whip cracking pies training exhausted grad students basically at gunpoint to journals that want to sweep the problem under the rug, and a circle-jerking funding mechanism that depends on it and an ivory tower that refuses to embrace the openness and technology required to combat it. It's shocking and it's got me ashamed of this whole enterprise. I think I want out, but it may be too late for me. I think people really underestimate how the research record is irreproducible, anomalous, heavily massaged, or just plain fabricated crap. Thanks for being so much braver than I can be right now. I am so sorry to hear that. I had many friends that felt the same way. Best wishes to you, friend. User has verified their identity. Would you do it again considering the consequences? Yes. Can you elaborate on this? As I understand from reading, 3/4 of whistleblowers lose their employment. Less than 1/4 gain any financial compensation. All whistleblowers lose their employment. Plenty can sue and receive some form of compensation for wrongful firing though. Not in the state I was employed, to my knowledge. One attorney actually said they can fire you for wearing blue shoes in this state, because they don't like blue shoes. It was a very pro-employer state. Hi, I'm wondering if you could share more details about the lab's reason for the fraudulent activity? The way it was explained to me was science is just as competitive as business. You start at the bottom. You get lucky with a study and strike gold. But in order to stay at the top, you decide to cut a corner to save time. Soon, you cut another corner, then another, and another. Keep in mind, none of this was done with ill intent originally. By the end of the day you end up justifying all the corners you cut, but your work becomes something else entirely. In academic circles the problem, things like competitiveness, mainly comes from the way funds are divided. I don't know how it is done in the US but I can imagine it doesn't differ that much from here in Europe. Simply put, to get your funding at the beginning of a year, your department, be it languages, science, whatever needs to churn out scientific papers and books. Not meeting your quota as a department means less funds, means tougher year. First and foremost this gives rise to a complete stunting of research. Departments will rather rehash old ideas, bordering on the verge of plagiarism, or fill in flimsy written papers with pseudo-scientific and incorrect bullshit. As long as there's a steady stream of written material coming out of the department, original research and the investigation of new things becomes too time consuming to be valuable when looked at from a financial perspective. Which means that you are either going to go with the flow, or come up with something new that has to sound extremely good and quickly manageable. Secondly, situations like the one you found yourself in arise. New research will take place but as you stated, corners get cut, and then some, and eventually some more, and you end up with a bastard child of the thing you originally started. Falsification, approximation of results, anything to keep the money rolling in. So yeah, science is just as competitive as business because science stopped being about the science and started being about money, just as pretty much everything else. Sorry you had to find this out the hard way. But seriously, good on you for being an awesome human being. Have you been able to restore your career since blowing the whistle? No, I lost my job, my career, and my passion. In the beginning, did you realize what the consequences to you will be? If so, what was the main reason to go through that? And why did you lose your friends? I can understand why you lost your job, but I would have thought your friends will help you more than anything. I had no idea what the consequences would be. My main reason for coming forth was I was a very big believer in the scientific research we were doing, and honestly felt like we were going to change the world. I quickly realized my boss just cared about securing funding and padding a resume, which already was vast. I was very close to many of my co-workers who I considered friends. All of them except 3 turned on me in various forms: spying, backtalking, converting others to vilifying me, using their seniority status to blacklist me, etc. Those 3 are real friends. Also, would there be any legal problems if you told us what company you worked for? I've had threats of a personal defamation lawsuit relayed to me before. It's one of the top 5 universities in the world. I'd also prefer not to disclose the name because I feel it unfairly paints a nasty picture of an otherwise storied career. It's shame that people who really want to make a difference in the world got screwed and people who are in it only for the money can live happily ever after. You have my respect for what you did, and I hope that maybe some of your future employers will recognize that as something really positive. Thank you. I really felt disgusted when parents of the children who were in our studies felt like they were doing something wrong, crying and asking for help, when I knew it was due to our studies being fraudulent. I actually gave up another more lucrative job to go back to school then pursue this career path, as I wanted to change the world. I left demoralized, dependent on anti-anxiety meds, and had to seek therapy, but honestly feel like I came out more resilient due to this experience. Thank you for demonstrating integrity. My SO also works in big research and constantly complains about some of the practices that have become common which really detract from the noble perception of science. He always talks about his bosses submitting peer reviews late to help stop competition, or moving funds about and pressing people for projects so they can keep on adding their name to the lists of authors on papers. Obviously what you experienced is the next step of this. Do you think this experience has given you any idea how to fix this bad culture in science? At the end of the day, it is we who suffer from all this petty childish behavior when good science just doesn't get done. The way the environment is set up now for research is absolutely atrocious. There are too many journals sprouting out which only serve to produce papers, causing an inflation. It literally is publish or perish. To make matters worse, the government is cutting spending costs which amount to another $1 billion in the next 10 years. The ultimate goal of all scientists is to become tenured and run their own lab so they can focus on their own research. That is incredibly hard to do, as there are so many people out there with publications. Rant. This unfortunately has some scientists feeling there is no other recourse other than to cut corners. How many corners they cut, and which ones they do, are completely up to them. I'm not sure how to even begin solving the problem aside from raising awareness to how integral science is for our future. Stuff like optogenetics is absolutely fascinating, and the more the public becomes aware of the benefits, the more they will invest in our future. Were you compensated for whistleblowing? You lost your job and I guess the field you're working at is very specific and close to each other. Wouldn't that mean that you'd have to move and or change your field? Would you get compensated for something like that? I lost my job and will have to change my career. This was a constant subtle reminder that HR gave me as well as the director. I luckily received a severance package which I did not expect, as well as a letter of recommendation as part of the negotiation process for another issue to prevent the institution from getting liability, not related to the whistleblowing. Unfortunately, the attorneys I contacted said the amount of money they expect this kind of case to collect is in the range of $400,000 to $600,000. Which amounts to $100,000 $150,000 for them for a 4-5 year case. For them, It was simply not worth it unless the case was airtight. I did not have the exact financial records that they were most concerned with, which was defrauding the government of money. The institution, however, admitted to defrauding the government, which resulted in all funding being suspended, but they apparently took that as a preemptive step to prevent me from collecting damages. I was bummed, but that was not my reason for stepping forward. What has it been like looking for a different job in the same field? I would think, perhaps naively, that there would be enough scientists who abhor the idea of falsifying research that they would be interested in you. All my passion was killed in research, so even though I feel I could attempt another foray into the field, all it would be doing is taking a worthy position away from someone who actually had the drive and would stick with it, and I could not live with that. If my passion ever returns and the government changes their view towards research, I might attempt to return for another foray into the field. Was the research funding only from the government, or was there private funding as well? It was primarily government funding, but we had a lot of wealthy patients, one of which donated over 1.5 million over 3 years to my knowledge. I don't have any questions really. I guess I'm not really surprised by any of your answers given so far, but I just wanted to thank you. Even if you didn't fully know what you were getting into, it was still a brave and honorable act you've done. I'm glad you stood up for what you believed in, and for what it's worth, you have my utmost respect. Thank you. This may sound cliche, but I don't consider myself brave. I had to take anti-anxiety meds for the first time in my life and seek therapy. This is on top of several people with many years experience warning me what would happen next and how to combat it. All I did was listen to what they said and fight every urge in my body which told me to give up. Speaking of cliches, there's a nice quote that reminds me of what you just said. It goes something like, courage is being afraid but going through with it anyways. It's probably not exact, but you get the gist. I would be surprised if you felt brave, but just know that I think that you are. Especially when you were fighting yourself and your own emotions as well. Edit. Thank you for the gold, whoever you are, mysterious stranger. How's your personal life doing? Was it permanently affected by this experience? If so, do you think this whole thing will ever blow over enough to where you can return to a normal life? On a side note, I'd like to say thank you. Our country is better because of people like you. My personal life suffered a lot due to all my free time being spent looking up laws and speaking to attorneys, as well planning for the next day. So, what does the process of whistleblowing look like? I know the federal government, or is it by state, has laws to protect whistleblowing. Did these help or hinder you at all? It's a very lengthy process, and the success rate, I believe, of cases that make it to court and get approved are 1 in 5, as explained to me. This is why most top attorneys won't bother with cases with possible settlements below 10 million, because they all operate off of compensation percentages of the awarded settlement, since whistleblowers usually do not have the funds procured to hire these attorneys. Did any positive change at this institution result from you blowing the whistle? In other words, was risking and losing everything worth it in the end? I feel it was. All the research we did equates to tax dollars being spent on fault research to pay for salaries. Other studies point to ours and try to replicate it, which results in more wasted dollars. What would happen, which was even worse, was my director was very well connected, MD PhD. Him and his acquaintances had a habit of passing papers around by approving them for publication without really reading them. This went on and on. Today marks exactly 1 month since I was forced out of my job in healthcare for reporting abuse and objecting to departmental changes set in place to punish us, but mostly myself, for filing reports that could have cost the company a lot of money and talent had they acted. I have no way to get my life back as well. I want to thank you for doing this Ask Me Anything and helping people understand the mindset and perils of becoming a whistleblower. I am very sorry to hear that, and wish you the best of luck in your future. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content. It's free and that's a great price.